Hello and welcome to episode 80 of the Machine Ethics Podcast. This time we're joined by Sarah Brin, and this conversation was recorded on the 12th of September 2023. Sarah and I talk about the types of AI, the process of making artwork with AI, how is an artwork culturally valuable in and of itself, curatorial practices for AI art, collaborative artwork with AI in games, and much, much more. If you've enjoyed this episode, you'd like to find out more, you can go to machine-ethics.net. You can contact us via email at hello@machine-ethics.net. You can follow us on Twitter, machine_ethics, Instagram, Machine Ethics Podcast, YouTube, youtube.com/@machine-ethics. And if you can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/machine ethics. Thanks very much and hope you enjoy. Hi, Sarah. Welcome to the podcast. If you could please introduce yourself, tell us who you are and what you do.
Hey, my name is Sarah Brin. I am an expert in digital creativity. I have a background in art history, especially surrounding newer technologies. And I also work full-time at a video game AI company called Curatorial AI.
Awesome. And I was extremely excited to get you on the podcast because I had this notion that we've had a couple of episodes which kind of touch on art and creativity in AI. And since then, we've had literally an explosion of like creative AI services and products and large language models and image stuff, which has really contributed to this conversation. And I think I really wanted to revisit it. And you put yourself above the parapet, and I thought that you were like literally the perfect person to have a chat with. So thank you very much for joining me. I wanted to ask you about creativity, but the first thing we always ask on the podcast is, what is AI?
Oh gosh. So the first part is easy, right? So that's artificial, right? So for the purposes of this conversation, we can say made by a machine. Intelligence is the harder, trickier one, right? So we can say that intelligence might mean the ability to solve problems or complete tasks, and that's like the shorthand I often use. But you might also know that there's a whole bunch of different types of intelligence, right? So there's like kinetic intelligence, there's interpersonal intelligence, and I think that the current definition of AI has a very limited definition of what intelligence is and can be.
It's interesting because I see parallels a bit with, you had this recent talk at Gamescom this year, and you were talking about different types of fun as well. Lots of different types of fun. And it's very hard to actually define some of these words in a succinct way, and it's multifaceted and stuff like that. So are you kind of referring to like the Boston Dynamics robots? You know, they are maybe, let's say, intelligent at kinetic stuff. And then you have things like stable diffusion or whatever, which those systems might be more intelligent in this image or like interpretation sort of way.
There are loads of different types of AI as well, as I already know, right? So there's like spam filters are a type of AI, and that's something that does one thing really well. And then yes, there's also generative AI, which is the one that's getting a lot of attention right now. And then there's the type of AI that I work with in my day job, and that's very much oriented towards solving a problem or completing a task. And then there's also stuff like theory of mind AI, which is, does the AI itself like have an awareness of itself, or then there's self-aware AI, and there's just so many different types. So
should we clarify that there isn't self-aware AI?
There is not.
Yes, good.
There is not. That is correct. But according to a study that came out a little while ago, there might be an AI that has theory of mind equivalent to a 9-year-old child, but I think there's more to be discovered there.
Yeah, I don't think I've read that one, but that sounds like there's a lot of nuance there, because I have a 6-year-old child and that's sort of terrifying that there might be something that is more, let's say, more powerful. I'm doing inverted like hand quotes here. More powerful than that is slightly unnerving, right?
Yes. Yes. I think about my dog as a, like, maybe has a level of intelligence of a 3-year-old child. And I don't, it would be very, very scary. But yeah, it was GPT-4 that some researchers decided that theory of mind might have spontaneously emerged in it. But who knows? I think this was just a couple of weeks ago as well.
Yeah. I think we could definitely go down the rabbit hole of talking more about that. But I want to kind of segue us back to the more creative endeavors, because we have this idea that, like I was saying at the beginning, we have these new tools and there are new issues or impacts with those tools that people are either literally feeling or are, on the horizon somewhere. And what I wanted to get into really today was this idea that we have human-made things and that we derive value from those things. And I'd love to have your feeling about how that relationship changes when actually the work or the product, the creative endeavor, the thing that is being produced either has, let's say, little or limited human input, right? And should that change how we feel about the artwork, or how we talk about it, or how we obviously there's legal ramifications that we're going through at the moment, but just on that point, do you have any kind of gut feelings about how our situation is changing because of these facts?
Well, it is and it isn't in some ways. So like a lot of my work in an art historical context and working with like large cultural institutions like SF MoMA and the Museum of Contemporary Art in Los Angeles is around working with artists made video games, right? And I think, and I've also done a lot of work with digital fabrication, so like 3D printing and laser cutters. So I think it's very normal for a lot of people to say, hold on a second, I can't see the hand of the artist in that. I can't see the hand of a human, meaning they can't see a brush stroke or like the role of the human in the process. They just see the object. So, and I think in a lot of ways that's a curatorial problem, right? So like a lot of art and design focuses specifically on the finished object. But a lot of what's really interesting in art to me is the process of making the artwork. And so when we start to think about how humans and AI work together, what's really interesting to me is that process, that back and forth, that exchange, and not so much the finished object.
Let's say that you are, let's make a hypothetical situation for you here, Sarah. So you're in a gallery, let's say. I mean, this is a very contextual space already. So we're walking into a gallery, we're expecting a certain thing to happen to us. There's probably white walls, there's some writing on the walls somewhere. And you see maybe a large painting, let's say, because that's a very easy medium for everyone to kind of grok, have in their mind. And it says just, it has a title and it has a name, and maybe that's what you get given. Let's say that painting or that image was created through a system. And let's, for argument's sake, say the individual artist had little to do with that. Maybe just they put in a prompt. And the first thing came up, they printed it really, really big, and it was awesome. Okay, it was so awesome. I think I'm trying to get at is like, how is it okay that people still get a lot from that painting, right? Like the aesthetic of it, maybe. How do they feel when they view it? That sort of thing. The emotion, are they emotionally charged? And actually, should we care about the fact that it's produced by AI and less about that, and care more about how the visceral reaction of being a human being in a space viewing something is? You're nodding. I'm just going to...
So, first of all, I'm a populist, right? So I am kind of like art historian and art worker who understands that a lot of people feel alienated in museums. And I am the person who's here to tell you it's okay to like what you like. It's okay to not like what you don't like. And the same goes with wine. The same goes with cheese. It's the same thing. And so, yes, it's okay to like things. And there are also really different personal reasons why we like things. And if that thing is created by a machine, fine, great. Yeah. However, there are also mechanics in terms of how we decide if something is culturally important or not. And so who are those arbiters of importance, right? So that's going to be museums, that's going to be art critics, that's going to be press, right? And so usually when one of these organizations is deciding if something is art historically meritorious, there are criteria that they apply to the work. So is it art historically valid or even art historically interesting if it's just, okay, a computer made this? There's not much of a story to tell there. And in terms of deciding, okay, if this is this valuable? Is this culturally valuable? Is it monetarily valuable? That's a huge part of museums as well.
Yep.
Is a really important question to ask. So yeah, there's a little bit of a distinction between high art and everyday art.
Yeah. So there's a validity to its kind of presence there in the gallery itself, like and how that's what the mechanisms of that are. Is it by extension? Let's take it to a little bit more, like I keep saying visceral, but like in music, that there is this response as well, and I'm going to say that for me, listening to a bit of a music produced by some sort of AI system probably has the same reaction, right? Than not. And the only kind of thoughts I have on that initially, knowing maybe that a piece was made by AI, is maybe that it's mediocre or fine. You know what I mean? Maybe it doesn't have the highs and lows that maybe a human-made piece, or the inaccuracies maybe.
And I think when we talk about like appreciating particular artworks or pieces of music, talking about the context in which the works are produced adds a lot to our understandings of and our feelings about the work. So if, we were talking about like a poem, part of the story is like, oh yes, Langston Hughes, was part of the Harlem Renaissance, and this is what life was like. And the artwork becomes a piece of a puzzle, of an overarching story. With AI created works, I think we need to tell a different type of story. Doesn't mean that story can't be rich and interesting, but we need to figure out how to tell it and what it is.
And again, that comes back to like the curatorial issue, right? I remember because I used to be interested in art. Should I say no? That's bad. I am still interested in art. Yes, good. But I had this problem, I guess, back when we were talking about new media artworks and how to present those in the gallery or present those in different spaces, and how, for example, internet art or screen-based media could be presented, right? And I guess that's another extension of that. Like, how do we tell this story of this artwork or this creative practice? What does that look like? All these different things that this new technology is enabling.
Absolutely. And so something I really enjoyed doing when I worked at the Pure 9 digital fabrication facility. So it was a building in San Francisco that's run by Autodesk and is full of all this like really sophisticated digital fabrication hardware. And so what I would do when I was curating the artists in residence shows, I would show the artworks inside of the machines that produce them. So that way I could have a water jet cut sculpture displayed on the Omax water jet cutter, which is like this massive machine that has basically like a nozzle on a gantry that moves back and forth that sprays highly pressurized water and sand that can cut through 6 inches of steel. So, and it's also like in this, like a kind of big bed that looks like a nightmare swimming pool. And so being able to like show those things in conversation with each other really helps tell that story of how the thing got made. And I'm sure, if we were to think about it a little while, there's so much we could do curatorially to tell the story and provide that as well. However, that's not really conducive with a kind of white box of museum that a lot of us are more or less acquainted with.
Yeah, exactly. It depends on how thoroughly you would like to invite that into the gallery space. I always find that there's quite a few shows at the Barbican I went to over the years that do that, where they maybe curating the process as well as the artworks themselves, or at least having extensive information about it. Yeah, it's funny because you kind of often there's this other tension, right, where you might have some sort of reaction to a piece, a sculpture, let's say, for example, and then you read the title and you read that it's from AI, and maybe you have now a different response and you feel differently about it, and it changes your perspective on the scene, on how it is, as if it didn't have that label. But obviously, that's always been a tension in gallery space anyway. But I feel like more so when it's like the hand of the artist is less prominent.
Absolutely. And sometimes seeing that AI is on a label can add to an experience, and sometimes it can challenge an expectation. I mean, and also very few people read these labels, unfortunately. Sometimes you'll look at a label and it'll be like, talk about like the components, and you'll be like, oh my God, the artist's own blood.
Yeah.
And it'll be like, whoa. So, I think it's interesting to have that context, and people will bring whatever they want to the interpretation.
Great. Okay, we've solved that. We're just gonna get all the curators in, and then just kind of like load it onto them. They're like, go nuts, guys.
You're ready.
Yeah, that's
smart.
It. Do you think it's important for those types of spaces to really understand a bit about the technology to be able to display it in a way that is going to be communicative?
Absolutely. And museums are usually the last to integrate emerging technology. So usually you'll see a technology pop up in industry, then maybe some early adopters in the creative sector. Military is also unfortunately likely to be an early adopter of emerging techs as well. But and then education, and then cultural institutions. So, and that's why, sometimes you're in a museum and you're like, oh, this interactive is broken. Because, they often don't have the resources or the infrastructure to keep up with timely things. A lot of museums are meant to collect things that are static, like sculptures and paintings, but you don't have like the operating system for painting go out of existence, right? You don't have like an engine stop being supported for a sculpture. So yes, it takes a lot of cultural change and education to get a whole organization on board with a new technology. I've done that firsthand with video games, and it's a lot of work.
Yeah. Is that with like archiving video game stuff and presenting that out of date?
Archival stuff, visitor services. So like the people who are working on the gallery floor, like they need to know what to say. They need to be able to restart something if it breaks. There's curatorial, of course, and then there's security. There's loads to factor in.
Let's sidestep now to the kind of impending doom, right? Which is like the generative AI is going to take our jobs situation. I like coding, and I like having that kind of intellectual puzzle, which is creating something that works, right? And it feels like lots of people who were concept artists or illustrators or photographers are being essentially slapped in the face with this kind of ease of production, which is kind of getting in the way of maybe work, or in fact, taking some of their work and melding it into the system to produce new artifacts. So I know you mentioned in that video that I mentioned earlier at Gamescom that you're pro unionization for maybe the games industry. Does that extend to those sorts of people, those creative art workers, let's say?
Absolutely. And we can see what a powerful force it is for the Writers Guild and the Screen Actors Guild to unionize. They've shut down a whole industry, and I am heartened by the unionization efforts I'm seeing in the US at some Amazon warehouses and at Starbucks, et cetera. Yeah, and it is my hope that they'll take a page from that book. I think if you're working as a freelancer, it's a lot harder to think about. However, there are freelancer unions, but I think it's important for people to make it. Technological advancement doesn't have to be at human expense, but it's unfortunate that not everyone thinks that way.
Yeah. And it's not always distributed evenly as well. Like someone who is, a concept artist might be impacted initially today, and then someone further down the line, developers, whatever, doing kind of basic gameplay programming, maybe more so tomorrow, and is making sense out of that stuff from an economic point of view, which is what we're grappling with at the moment, I guess.
Yeah, what we're seeing is happening in a few different channels. So there's a drive, an economic drive by studio heads in major companies. And I think they're not necessarily thinking about the craft, they're not necessarily thinking about the process. But an interesting side effect of this is that if we keep on training data sets on things that exist already, there's only certain types of innovation we can get. So it's going to be more of the same, and we're going to see things in different combinations.
Yeah.
But we're taking a certain part of human innovation out of the picture, and this doesn't necessarily mean that it's show over for concept artists. I do think that it can be an opportunity to complicate and evolve new types of art practices. Just like when, photography was invented, a lot of artists were like, oh no, painting is over forever. And then what they did instead is they kind of moved more towards abstraction. They moved towards expressionism, and it kind of pushed the medium forward. What is different about a lot of types of AI is that the impact of AI is not just limited to a specific field. It is across seemingly everything. And again, that doesn't need to be a bad thing. We need to have certain protections in place to make sure technology can serve people.
Awesome. Yes. I mean, my hope is that we are creating a better situation, at the end of this, instead of destroying the wealth of stuff that we had. It'd be a disaster if we look back and went, oh, the noughties, they were like, that's the pinnacle of human, the human epoch, and no, it's been terrible ever since that AI stuff was came in. We're obviously doing the wrong things if that was the case. Do you see many people kind of really embracing the technology at the moment and getting a lot out of it in terms of those creative practices?
Yeah, and I think there's different types of enthusiasm around it, right? And so I always like to point to something called the Gartner hype cycle when I talk about new technologies. And what that does is it shows kind of gap in the hype around a new technology and what it can actually do. And then there's always like a point called the trough of disillusionment in which it can do something. So I think, there's some hype, and I think that people might be disappointed about where AI is at in terms of its ability to generate certain things it does really well. And then there are people who have been using AI for a long time to complicate and complexify the practices, like Sugun Chung, who's been working with data sets and industrial robot arms for many, many, many years now. What she does is she trains robots based on her gestures when she's drawing or painting, and then they draw and paint along with her, and they make collaborative artworks together. Or there's another piece that I love so much. That's a game artwork called How to Not Get Hit by a Self-Driving Car, in which the AI itself is the mechanic, and you win the game by tricking the human detection in an AI into thinking that you are not a person. And of course, what's funny in that situation is if you were to effectively trick the AI, you would get hit by a car. It's also really interesting because in the process of playing, you're training the AI in order to work better. So yeah, I think there are loads of artists and creative people who have been using AI in really, really interesting ways. But for me, I think the most interesting projects come with like a back and forth between the player. It's not just, okay, press a button on the AI and it's done. Mm-hmm. It's interesting to me when it's a conversation, when it's a back and forth. I mean, I think that, if you think about AI in artworks, there is a lot of people think about art as an end product, as a visual object. And I think that what I'd like to see when we talk about the evolution of different art processes is evolving our understanding of what art can be. Mm-hmm. If you're a person like me and you've gone to art school for a million years, like you understand that performance can be an art form. You can understand that, like, reading some instructions, like draw a straight line and follow it, that's also an artwork. But that is I would say a fringe weirdo opinion. But what's interesting to me about when you have creatives and artists working with AI, we have a discussion about a technology that isn't led by industry and it's not led by military. Mm-hmm. And those tend to be the biggest factors about how products take shape and manifest in our world. So I do hope that artists continue to experiment with AI and have more opportunities to do it, so we can continue to invite broader audiences to consider different perspectives of this technology that is going to affect the ways we live, whether we like it or not. Hopefully a lot of those ways will be positive, mm-hmm. But I think we need everyone on board, so it's not just like the Jeff Bezoses of the world who are deciding what this technology is.
Yes. Yeah. I think part of what an artist does, I guess, is reflect what's going on in the real world in a way that is saying something, right? Sometimes it might be, check this bad thing out, or check this beautiful thing out, or I have this feeling and I'm going to express it in these different ways. And art generally, and visual arts especially, have this dialogue that they can use with showing something about our current situation, and I guess from the AI and ethics point of view, it'd be really nice to get more of that. The example you gave earlier of that game and the automated car kind of detection game, that's almost that's there, right? That's like, these things are coming in, let's, like you say, like teach you about it and also try and train it in this fun participatory way. Like, that's really exciting and cool. So it'd be nice to see more things which were enabling people to kind of understand what's going on almost in a new way. It sounds that's one of the things that sounds exciting from what you mentioned earlier already.
Yeah. And when you have artists, pushing the boundaries of newer technologies, that also serves an R&D function for the company itself. So you can, in the process of doing that, you can find new use cases that can potentially be monetized. So it's not just like this, this thing for the good of the world to have artists making art, but artists are going to bring new approaches to tech that the limited amount of people that people are considered as users for a particular product aren't going to bring to the table.
It kind of reminds me of speculative design as well, just having these artworks or these items or real world objects tell a story about, in a way that Black Mirror does, like where are we going? This could be an artifact from that place, and isn't it interesting or terrifying or amazing?
And we can have good dreams of AI. It doesn't have to all be Black Mirror.
It's an easy touch point, right? But you're right. You're totally right. Yeah.
And it's much easier, especially even for me, to go down that road. But like, what if we could imagine? What if we could imagine the world we want?
That'd be awesome.
We should buy.
Yeah, I'm just hoping that the world that I want is also the world that other people want. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We'll have a dialogue about it. We'll see how we get to. Awesome. So before we ask the last question that we normally ask on the podcast, did you want to briefly talk about how the AI, some of these AI techniques, but also maybe AI historically have worked in the games industry, as that's where you're currently spending a lot of your time and have curatorial practice there as well.
Absolutely. So in video games, we have something called NPCs, which are non-playable characters. And actually, if you've been on TikTok lately, you might see people pretending to be NPCs and repeating like weird phrases like "ice cream so good" over and over. But if you've played a video game before, chances are you've encountered an NPC. Those are the characters that you often give you a task and say, or they set context, be like, "Oh, last cowboys across that ridge we haven't seen again," or I heard there's gold in them there hills. And I'm so good at writing video games. And we also have enemy NPCs, right? So those are the bad guys that are going to try to catch you or capture you or shoot you in a video game. So that's actually AI. That's not generative AI. That's kind of more like machine learning. But that's what the company that I work for does. Things which helps developers with things like marking up digital terrain to see where is navigable and where is not navigable. Doing that for 2D and 3D dimensions. Also designing the behavior for different types of NPCs. So is this NPC going to remember that he's passed you before, or is its approach to you going to change based on the fact that you threw something at him? So NPCs have been around in video games for almost as long as video games themselves. So when people get really excited about AI, but this particular technology has been around for a long time. Mm-hmm. It's very cool, but it's not the same as ChatGPT.
Yeah, it's kind of like we talk about all these things in the same umbrella, but we've got all these different techniques, and almost the different industries talk about it in different ways. Like games have been talking about AI as a term for kind of automated behavior since the beginning of games, really, computer games. But that's definitely not like machine learning or something. But machine learning has all these other techniques in it as well. Right. So it's like it's very muddy, this area. I'm gonna come back to some of the episodes that I recommend on some of these subjects at the end. So Sarah, thank you very much for joining me on the podcast. The last question we always ask is, what excites you and what scares you about our AI-mediated future?
I'm sure everyone says this. I'm excited for AI to possibly help us solve the climate emergency. I saw a tweet about this not too long ago, and it was like, why does all AI want to be a screenwriter, or can some of it help us pick garbage out of the ocean? And so I would love some of that good AI that can pick garbage out of the ocean. The stuff that scares me is, we've seen a lot of tech companies that prioritize economic growth above everything else. And so why would the approach to AI be different? Which is why I've been outspoken about labor rights and protections for individuals whose work might be impacted by AI itself.
Thank you very much for your time. How do people find you, follow you, all that sort of thing?
Oh, this is so uncool, but I have LinkedIn. My name is Sarah Brin, SarahBrin. You can find me there. I also have a website that's pretty good, I think. It's www.sarahbrin.com. Thanks. Please give me a shout. I love to meet interesting people who care about anything, really.
What an invitation. Cool. Well, thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Ben.
Hi, and welcome to the end of the podcast. Thanks very much for bearing with me. I had an extremely creaky chair in this episode, so I'm really sorry about that. That came through a few times, so I'll try and get on top of that for the next one. We also mentioned in the episode there are other episodes you should check out. So if you're interested in more AI and art, you can check out episode 41. We talk a lot about speculative design in episode 55, and lots of game stuff in episode 65 and a few after that as well. Thanks again for listening. If you can support the podcast, please go to patreon.com/machine ethics, and you can sign up there for some extra bits and bobs, and you can support the podcast continuing into the future on AI and ethics, tech ethics, all that sort of great stuff. And also, if you'd like to get hold of me for talks, workshops, or anything like that, you can go to hello@machine-ethics.net, or just say hello, and that'd be great too. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.